Perfect. All right. All right. Welcome, everyone. We are here today to learn about what is recyclable in Howard County. I know there's lots of questions about this in my own household, so I'm very excited to bring this information to you today. So why won't my screen? There we go. So I am Bonnie Sorak. I'm the Director of Outreach for Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. We are the co-host of today's program. And then with me today, I also have John Collins. He's our new outreach assistant, just here a month, but he's helping us on the tech end. So if you have any questions, you can certainly put them in the chat. So today, what are we going to do? We're going to do a really quick overview of the Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, our organization. Then we're going to turn it over to our guest speaker, Gina Van De Walle, who's going to give us a presentation about what's new and what's recyclable in Howard County. We will have an opportunity for questions and answers at the end, so we definitely have saved plenty of time for you to get your specific questions answered. As I said, we will be recording this event, so if you don't want your image to appear on the recording, please keep your camera turned off. And since we're going, if you have questions that you want to go ahead and put them in the chat, that would be great. And then we will also take, at the end, you'll be able to come off mute and ask your questions verbally if you don't want to put it in the chat. So before I jump in, I do ask if you are a member of a congregation, we'd love to hear from you, who you are and what congregation you're with. So if you want to put that in the chat, that would be great. So just a quick overview, and before we get started, and it is in line with the theme of today, we always like to start our presentations with a land acknowledgement. Certainly we know that ancient peoples were on this land stewarding it before us. And building and recycling is an acknowledgement of that precious resource of land that we have. So the more we can keep after landfills, the less likely we are to need another landfill. And I can't think of a way to be more respectful of the land than to try to keep us from disposing of things improperly. So thank you to the ancient people who cared for this land before us. So Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake is a nonprofit organization. We have a focus on polluted stormwater runoff. Just to quickly say, the work that we do is we say, do unto those downstream as you would have those upstream do unto you. And that's kind of what we try to instill in all of our congregations. So we do this in many different ways, but we work with people of all different faiths. So whether you're Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Sikh, Buddhist, Hindu, all people of faith have a tenet of caring for God's creation. And our goal is to work with all congregations, hopefully, to start creation care ministries. So like today, what we do is we act as a connector or a translator between faith communities, governmental agencies, and technical partners to bring congregations, people of faith into stewardship. But we're always open and welcome to all people, not just people who are parts of congregations. Just really little brief education about the Chesapeake Bay. It is a large watershed with over 64,000 square miles and 18 million people that live here. So we are all connected, and everything that they do up in Cooperstown, New York, like that water flows down to us. So we say that we're all in this bathtub together. So we're all in this 18 million person bathtub. So we have a responsibility to take care of each other, and recycling is a way to help take care of each other. So we do this in many different ways. We work with congregations to do educational events like this, doing in-the-ground projects like tree plantings and cisterns and rain gardens and conservation landscaping, and then also going forth on advocacy issues and providing other information like this presentation today. So as I said, we think that every congregation should have a green team or creation care ministry of some kind. Our next training of our Faithful Green Leaders training will be in October. And so we're always looking for congregations to join us in starting their ministries or helping to sustain their ministries. We do have our One Water Partnership Program, which is a network of congregations that come together. We have One Water Partnership networks in Anne Arundel County, Baltimore City and County, Harford County, Howard County, the Lower Eastern Shore, and Lancaster, Pennsylvania as well. So if you know people in those areas, send them our way. We want to talk to them too. So we ask our congregations to sign a pledge saying they're going to care for God's creation, and that is on our website. So that was quick. So now what you're really here for. So we're thrilled to have with us today Gina Van De Walle, who's going to present the subject matter of what's recyclable. But before we jump into that, we do want to say thank you to Howard County. It was through them and their generous support through a grant that helps to pay for our outreach and education opportunities. So thanks to Live Green Howard. And Gina, I'm going to stop sharing my slides and I will let you take it away.
Thanks, Bonnie. I'm really excited to be here. I am a recycling coordinator with Howard County's Bureau of Environmental Services. We are under the umbrella of Department of Public Works for the county. And my bureau mainly handles all curbside collections, recycling, composting, and operations at our landfill. We also have a stormwater management division as well underneath our bureau. But today we're going to be talking mostly about recycling, a little bit about composting. Let me share my screen. All right, so our campaign that we started a couple of years back is called Know Before You Throw. And the intention behind it was to really help folks determine what to do with multiple items that they see and use in their life. So from this, we kind of created a really general understanding of your blue bin recycling or your single stream recycling. So if you're not aware, Howard County, along with many counties in Maryland, has single stream recycling, which essentially means that we are mixing all of our materials together in one container. Way back when, we used to have something called dual stream, and that required the individual to do a lot of separation and sorting at the curb. Now we have much nicer technology that allows us to mix everything together and it's sorted at our processor. But the rules are still very similar to how it used to be. We still want to make sure that all of our material is fairly clean. A light rinse is really as clean as it needs to be. We're not really expecting you to put this through your dishwasher or scrub at it. We just want to make sure that there's no residue that's going to cause our paper products to potentially get soiled. You don't need to remove any lids, labels, caps, anything like that. They can all stay on your items. And we also want to make sure that we keep it loose. No plastic bags. Plastic bags cause a huge issue in our sorting process. So we like to keep those out. And we'll talk a little bit about plastic bag recycling in a bit. So our material types, we cover the basics. We do paper, plastic, mostly bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars. Our metal is going to be mostly food and beverage metal, so soda cans, soup cans, things of that nature. Glass is the same. It's going to be food and beverage like jam jars or wine bottles. And then our cardboard should be fairly clean. It can be a little bit wet if it's sitting out in the rain. That's not a big deal, but we don't want any soiled cardboard from grease or food. All right, so what happens? You put out all this material in your blue bin. Where does it go? Well, we at Howard County have contracted multiple haulers that they are coming to pick up your blue cart and your neighbors. They tip it into the back of their recycling truck. It's transported to Waste Management's recycling processor. And that's located in Elkridge, right off of Route 1. All that material is tipped out onto their tipping floor, where it heads up a conveyor belt. And then on the conveyor belt, we have the first line of defense, which is multiple hands on deck that are doing a pre-sort. So they're there to pull out any really obviously incorrect items. That could be plastic bags. It could be propane tanks. It could be bulky items that are just not going to fit on the conveyor. So they are our first line of defense. From there, it goes through a series of mechanical sorting. So we have a lot of manual sorting from individuals who work for waste management. They also have infrared sorters that are able to determine the type of plastic and separate them based on that. We have metal, we have magnets to pull out our steel cans, our magnetic cans. And we also have essentially a reverse magnetism. So an eddy current that is going to repel any non-magnetic metals like our aluminum cans. So there's a lot of sorting happening. Once we have them all sorted by product type, by material type, they get baled into essentially what looks like large hay bales, but they are recyclables. They are loaded onto trucks and they are sent out to third-party companies that are actually recycling that material. So what's important to note is what's happening at Waste Management in Elkridge is the sorting and baling process. The recycling process, whether it's going to be recycled by melting it down, the plastics are melted down into pellets, that's happening in other locations. So let's just take a look at the general makeup of Howard County's recycling. We do what we call sort tests. They are essentially a sample of all of our routes in the county. We take about 250 pounds from each route and we dump it out and we hand sort all of this material. So the photo in the top is an example of one of these sort tests that we do. So from that, we are manually sorting it so we can get just a general snapshot of what we see in our collection routes. That also helps us to determine maybe where we need to be marketing or educating better in the community if we see a lot of residue or a lot of incorrect material in the bin. But as you can see, the vast majority of what we're seeing in our blue bins are paper and cardboard. When you think about the fact that we are kind of living in the age of Amazon, it's not surprising to see that much paper and cardboard in our stream. But we do still get a large amount of glass and various types of plastics. The last item is our trash/residue. And when we use the term residue, it could be that it's either a material that is not recyclable in our program, or it could be a recyclable material, but it's soiled or it's improperly packaged and it's counted against us as residue. We want to keep that number really low. 10% is actually not too bad. The industry average is more like 20 to 30%. So Howard County is doing a very good job, but we'd like to see that reach zero if possible. So what is residue? So we talked a little bit about the general non-recyclables in our program, recyclables that are contaminated or soiled. But I'd like to touch on a couple that I think people tend to ask about the most. So paper plates, bowls, and cups. Paper is recyclable, but most paper plates, bowls, and cups are likely going to be soiled with food or liquids. So in general, we would like to keep them out. Even if you know it's clean, it's best to keep it out of our recycling because our manual sorters on site are going to see it and they're going to pull it out because they have to assume, like with pizza boxes, that they have grease or contamination. In Howard County, we do offer food scrap collection. We're going to talk a little bit about composting later on in the presentation, but your paper plates and cups, those are all great to be composted. So that's an alternative for those items. The big one is our #1 clamshell plastics. And I think this is probably what's asked the most of my office. Those #1 clamshell plastics are tricky because they're labeled as a #1 plastic resin, and traditionally #1s are readily recyclable. If you think about your water bottles or your soda bottles, those are all #1s. However, when it's in the form of a clamshell or in the form of packaging for electronics or batteries, it's actually what we call a thermoformed plastic. And those plastics are likely recyclable somewhere. Unfortunately, at least on the East Coast right now, we have not been able, and Waste Management has not been able to find any company that is interested or willing to buy that material back and recycle it. And you have to remember that recycling is still a business. So if there's no one willing to purchase the material and make something new, it's hard to justify collecting it, sorting it, baling it, and then sitting on it. So unfortunately, for the time being, we have to say no to those number one clamshell plastics. Styrofoam plastics are another type of plastic that unfortunately there's not a huge market for it, especially not in Maryland, since we banned styrofoam packaging in certain scenarios. You'll still see it in Maryland if you're buying material that is shipped to you and needs to be insulated or packaged. You might still get styrofoam there. But as far as styrofoam in food service, you shouldn't see it anymore in Maryland since 2020 when we banned it. So styrofoam, when you do have it, there is one place that I know of that you can still take it, and that is down in Crofton, Maryland. But for the most part, we should try to keep it out of our blue bin because it's just not acceptable there. And then we have a category of what we call tanglers. So that includes our plastic bags, our hoses, wires, cords, anything that's really going to get tangled up in the equipment at our processor. Those should all stay out of the blue bin. And we'll talk a little bit more about plastic bags and film. Textiles and clothing, we don't have a way of collecting and sorting it at our processor. However, there are lots of places that accept textiles and clothing to be recycled or resold. Scrap metal is another one where we don't really want it in the blue bin, but that doesn't mean those items, pots, pans, gas tanks, aren't recyclable. They just need to go to our landfill for a special disposal. And I'll make sure that you all have a copy of our slide deck so you can use any of these links to download all of these lists and get this information directly to you. Okay, so what about the bags? Bags, of course, are a huge problem in our blue bin at the recycling processor because of the damage and the wear and tear they can cause on the machinery. But plastic bags and film are technically recyclable back at collection sites. So you'll probably see a lot of these at big box stores, at grocery stores. And what they do is they collect all of these types of bags, from grocery bags to Ziploc bags to bubble wrap. All of those plastic bags are collected, they're melted down, and they're mixed with sawdust, and they're creating composite wood decking. So hang on to these bags if you have them, and whenever you go to the grocery store next, make sure you drop them off. A good way to tell is you can download their detailed list to know exactly what types of plastic film they accept. But another is the stretch test. If you're able to take that plastic film and it can stretch, it's likely to be recyclable. So if it can't stretch, typically that means it should go in the trash and stay out. But definitely consult their list for plastic film recycling just to make sure that you're doing everything correctly. So with our Know Before You Throw campaign, we created a website that was meant to be a directory of everything we could possibly think of and what to do with it. And I will say we are still updating it. I think we have about 100 items and we're still chugging along, getting new ones every day. But we have a very nice searchable table. So if you're not sure about something, go onto our Know Before You Throw page, type it in and see if we've already established what to do with it. If you don't see it in our list, let us know, because we're constantly adding and we want to make this as detailed as possible. And so, as I mentioned, some material might be acceptable in our blue bin for curbside collection, but other material like crayons, not something you would traditionally think of recycling, but there could be an outlet. Typically, it could be a mail-in or a drop-off recycling opportunity for those materials. We also have put together a very nice donation directory. Howard County offers bulk trash pickup for our residents. However, we always remind them that anything that they request for trash pickup does go into a landfill. And we'd like to avoid that, especially if the material is in decent shape and could have been donated. So our Know Before You Throw donation directory includes drop-off centers and the types of material they take. It also includes places that we know of that allow you to schedule a pickup. So if you're unable to drive and drop off something, you might be able to schedule a pickup with some of these companies, as well as consignment shops. So you might even get a little bit of money for something that you were about to throw away in a landfill. So we hope that you take this donation directory and use it. And once again, if there are places that you know of in Howard County or the surrounding area that's not listed here, let us know. We're also constantly updating this directory just so we can expand all of the options for our residents. I'm going to switch gears really quick and just talk about composting. So every few years we do a waste characterization study, and that is where we look at samples of our trash in Howard County, what we're picking up at the curb, and what's being thrown away at Alpha Ridge landfill. And we are still unfortunately seeing about 30% of that trash is organic material, and mostly that is food scraps. So the county has been we spearheaded food scrap collection in the county back in 2011. It's a growing program. We are slowly adding regions in the county where we will collect curbside. We're currently at about 65% of eligible homes now have it. So we'd like to continue to add on residents. There's still many residents in these green areas that aren't participating. It is an optional program, but we hope they do choose to participate, because we're finding, last year we basically diverted about 400 tons of food scraps. And of course, anytime we are diverting food scraps, we are reducing methane that's released into the atmosphere. Our food really does make up a large percentage of the methane in landfills. Our household hazardous waste is something I'd just like to touch on, because we are now in the beginning of our hazardous waste collection season. It begins April through November. It's held every Saturday for Howard County residents only. We do not accept any material from businesses. But if you're a Howard County resident and you are cleaning out your basement and you're finding a lot of cleaners, chemicals, maybe light bulbs, things of that nature, you can bring them to Alpha Ridge landfill. And we work with a group of chemists that is able to determine exactly how to properly dispose or recycle these products. If you've ever been to the landfill on a Saturday, you know how busy this area is. So I do encourage you to make sure that you're properly disposing of a lot of these hazardous materials if you have them. And I do want to talk about our light bulb exchange program that Live Green Howard, our Office of Community Sustainability, has put together. So if you want to avoid the traffic of the landfill on Saturdays for hazardous waste, and you just have some light bulbs to get rid of, we do list a couple of different drop-off locations and an exchange program at all of Howard County libraries. So you can take your old CFL light bulbs and exchange it for a new LED. So there's a lot of opportunities for you to recycle your light bulbs. We never want to see a light bulb in the recycling. We don't have a way of sorting and collecting them in the blue bin, but any of these drop-off locations or at Alpha Ridge landfill or at our library systems for an exchange is the best way to do it. And for those of you who haven't been to Alpha Ridge landfill or aren't familiar with it, you can take a virtual tour. We have a very nice virtual tour of the Residence Convenience Center, which is our main drop-off area for recycling, hard to recycle items, and regular household trash, as well as our hazardous waste drop-off. So it's a great location. We get a lot of praise for how organized the convenience center is, but I definitely encourage you to take the time to look over our tour, and it also helps you kind of pack efficiently your vehicle so that you don't have to pull things from the front of the truck that should have been in the back of the truck. So definitely take some time to look at that tour. And we have a sorting game too. And this is for everything from curbside trash, recycling, and food scraps to what you can recycle at our convenience center to hazardous waste items. So that is also available on our Know Before You Throw page. And just another plug, if you like this information, if you're curious what's going on in Howard County, we do put out an e-newsletter. It's typically monthly, but we also do updates about events. If our collections are changing because of upcoming holidays, all of that good stuff is available in our newsletter. So I encourage you to subscribe to that. And just wanted to also talk about our Green Awards. This is an annual award that we give out to community groups and businesses for their efforts, whether they're in recycling, composting, or just sustainability in general. So if you know of any businesses or community groups that are interested in applying, those applications, they typically open up in January, and then we announce winners at our annual Green Fest event at Howard Community College in April. So we had lots of winners this year. It's a great time to really showcase these Howard County businesses and community groups and the work that they're doing for the environment. All right, that is my my brief presentation, but I'm very happy to answer any questions about recycling, composting, or anything related to Howard County.
Thanks so much, Gina. I'm just going to quickly share my screen with just 2 announcements before we jump into questions and answers. Gina mentioned the film collection. I did want to let you know, and I put it in the chat. One of our congregations that's part of our network is St. John's Episcopal Church on Frederick Road. They are doing they're showing this film, The Story of Plastic, on July 26th. It's a Friday night. They would welcome any of you to come to that. And then they're also, it's here, oh, the top part, they are doing the plastic film recycling, and we will put in the chat a link to all the different films that they are collecting. If they get 1,000 pounds of that type of film, they work with Next Trucks, and they will get a park bench, and they're very excited about that. And then just wanted to let you all know, also, we have our Garden Guardians program. So if any of you are gardeners or know of people who are novice gardeners that would like to learn more about native plants, we have a network of 5 congregations that have a public schedule of when they're doing maintenance days. They would love to have folks come and join them for their garden maintenance days. All right, so now we're up to questions and answers. I know we had some in the chat, but I think Sue, I saw you raising your hand and you're unmuted, so you get to go first. Yes, okay. Go ahead.
So I have 3 questions, if I'm allowed to ask 3. First one is on scrap metal. This is the old door handle from my front door. What do we do with these?
Yeah, so if it's scrap metal, we don't want them in the blue bin because we can really only take like beverage and food containers for metal items in our blue bin. However, we do have a scrap metal drop-off at the Residence Convenience Center at Alpha Ridge Landfill. Or, depending on if the door handle's in good shape, Habitat for Humanity, the loading dock. Okay, there's a couple places that might be interested in taking it, but yes, if it's in bad shape and it needs to be recycled, definitely in our scrap metal drop-off at the convenience center.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad I didn't throw it away. Second question. Okay, this product has this plastic film that's on top of a plastic bottle, and it says to remove before recycling. Is that required?
Not in our program. So I know sometimes you'll see these labels, and I did bring some props too. You'll see these labels, they're called the How to Recycle label. I'm not sure if that's what you see on that container. It's a new type of labeling system, and it tends to give a little bit more detail. So yeah, no, I actually don't think I see it on that one. But as far as our program goes, labels can stay on. So I would consider that a label, and I would say it can definitely stay on and it shouldn't be a problem.
That's what this one says.
Yeah, and that looks like something probably the manufacturer put out. And it's tough because that's the manufacturer trying to make a blanket statement for a lot of different communities and their regulations. And that's kind of why we like the how to recycle labels, because they go through some rigorous testing and they also survey a lot of municipalities. So they're all on the same page. And if there's disagreement between how something should be packaged before set out or drop off, then that label typically says check locally, because there's too much discrepancy that they don't feel comfortable trying to make a clear statement on the label. But for the most part, we would say almost always your lids, caps, labels can all stay on in Howard County for collection.
Third question is, how does a business recycle paper in Howard County?
Oh, how does a business recycle? So yes, so Howard County typically doesn't collect from businesses. We typically only collect from our residents. We do have a business recycling page that is kind of devoted to helping businesses get started. And we list a lot of haulers that we know of that are available in the county to do collections. So it depends on the business. If it's an office type setting and they know they're really just going to have paper, they could go directly to a paper company. I believe Hannah Paper is an example of one local company that just specializes in paper recycling. And that, for a business that's only generating paper, that might be a better route than going for a company that does single stream. If they're not going to generate any like food packaging, they'll have a very clean stream. And I mean, office paper is still worth a good amount of money. So a lot of businesses can tend to make a profit from paper and cardboard recycling. But we do list a number of haulers that we know of, but we don't necessarily endorse any of them, but they are out there. We do allow also local businesses, so Howard County businesses that have single stream recycling can always drop off recycling at Alpha Ridge Landfill. So that's especially useful for like a small company that maybe can't afford to set up collection, or if they're in maybe a commercial area that they would need other businesses to sign on in order to have a dumpster available. They can always bring it to Alpha Ridge Landfill. We do not charge for businesses to drop off our single stream recycling.
Okay, so the business, it's a very small business. It's just paper. They could drop it off at Alpha Ridge?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Now, keep in mind, if they're bringing like a commercial vehicle, they should give us a heads up first, just so we know what they're bringing. But if it's, just it's in the back of a regular truck or car, yep, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sue. So we have a couple of questions in the chat that I'm going to try to address here. So Hal and Phyllis asked, what is number 5 clamshell versus number 1 clamshell?
Yeah, so number 1 clamshell, which clamshell was kind of like the industry term that has really changed over time, because they're now in all kinds of shapes and sizes, and not necessarily a hinged lid, which is where clamshell comes from. So I have an example of, this is what we consider a clamshell, or the technical term is a PET thermoformed plastic. So that's different from a water bottle, even though they both have a number 1. This number 1 does not look like a bottle. And I have always found that the number 1 clamshells, or number 1 PET thermoform plastics, just don't feel very sturdy to me as compared to soda bottles and things of that nature. They're usually kind of crinkly, they tend to bend, and they'll have that number 1 label. We can't accept any of these. I tend to use them a lot to get seeds started for my garden. They're very useful in that respect, not really useful in any other respect. The number 5 clamshells are relatively new, and we've been seeing them in takeout containers. And that shift happened after we banned styrofoam in Maryland. Any business that is serving food, whether it's takeout or if it's like a cafeteria at a college or an institution, they were all required to come up with an alternative packaging that was not styrofoam. So a lot of them went for a recyclable packaging, and they found these number 5 plastics. So an example of a number 5 plastic would be a takeout container like this. Sometimes they make these and the lids are hinged. And that's why we kind of specify number 5 clamshells are good, number 1 clamshells are bad, because we didn't want people to think, oh, anything that has a clamshell is not recyclable, which isn't true. It's really those number 1 plastics that are kind of rough. But any number 5s, if they have a clamshell or not, this is one example of like a Chinese food takeout. Another example of a number 5 would be like Rubbermaid reusable containers are also number 5s, and these could have hinges on them as well. So that's the main difference that you're looking out for. Just know that any number 5 is acceptable now. So if it's a takeout container, or if it's something like a yogurt tub, anything that's got a 5 is good to put in our blue bins.
Oh, that's great to know, Gina. Thank you so much. Answering so many questions. That's great. So I'm going to jump in. Ken has a list of 5 questions, so I'm going to dive into his index here. So cardboard box recycling, is it okay to leave any staples, or do I have to remove them first?
We're not too concerned about staples. Even really in your paper, if you have stapled paper and you drop it in the blue bin, it's okay, because when we recycle, or when the paper is eventually recycled, they're going to typically put it through like a chemical bath. It's shredded, and it goes through a bath, and then it's heated and pressed into new paper. During that process, they are pulling out any metal, right? So they're grabbing it with magnets, and I'm not super concerned about the metal staples. We do appreciate if you pull them out when you see them, because that always does make life a little bit easier on the processing end. The same with plastic tape that might be on a shipping cardboard package. It doesn't have to be removed, but we do appreciate it because that plastic tape isn't really recyclable in our program. So we love when people go the extra mile for this, but we're also not expecting, perfect recycling every time.
Just had that question yesterday because I had a box from Amazon. I'm like, going to take the tape off. So I did, but I'll keep trying.
And
All right,
sometimes
so
it's paper tape too. And if it's paper tape, I wouldn't worry about it at all.
All right, paper tape, good. Plastic tape, eh. All right. Ken also asks, Amazon plastic mailing envelopes. I have been recycling them at the grocery store plastic bag recycling containers, but first removing the papery mailing labels and stickers that get affixed to the plastic. Was it necessary to remove the non-plastic labels? My Ken, you are very dedicated. Does Ken have to keep spending his time removing labels from his Amazon packages?
So that those instructions are Amazon specific, and I get Amazon packages too, so I do pay attention to their requirements, and I do my best to pull off the paper labels. But I've definitely seen where they don't fully remove, and there's a little bit of residue. And I've wondered the same thing. We're telling our residents, if it's a program that another company is running, whether it's a drop off or a mail in, really try to adhere to their regulations. So if they're saying to pull off the label, it's probably good to do that. But I would say if you attend the Next Trex talk, that would be a great question to ask them, because they're the ones on the receiving end of all of those mailers. So it would be interesting to hear what Trex has to say about, how much contamination do those paper labels cause, and is it something that consumers should really be taking the time to remove first.
Right. His next question, maybe you already answered, but maybe it's worth asking again, and I have something similar. He says, envelopes with a clear plastic section that allows an address to be seen. Does the plastic need to be removed before recycling the paper portion? And I have the same question when the pasta that I buy has a little window on it, which I wish they would just do away with the window. It has a picture of the pasta on there, but there is a little plastic. So I spend my time like pulling that plastic off. Should we continue doing that or no?
So yeah, a few years back, if anyone does get our newsletter, they might have seen, oh, way back in 2019, there was news about, oh, we can't take windowed envelopes anymore. And that we are really beholden to waste management's regulations because they are our processor. And so we were told by them back in 2019 that that pesky little window is a problem and it needs to be removed. Well, they have since gone back on that statement. And so we have told people now you do not need to remove it. Of course, if you'd like to, that's great because it is making it a very clean stream by having less plastic film in with the paper. But ultimately, Waste Management did acknowledge that, maybe they went a little crazy when they were demanding the window to be removed first. So we're not too concerned. Same with our cardboard. If there's a plastic window in it, not a huge deal. I like to remove it just because it feels better to me, but it's not a requirement.
All right, paper bags from food takeout restaurants that contain a twine handle. Do I have to remove the handle before recycling the paper bag?
That's a good question that we haven't been coming across enough lately, but I'm aware of those takeout containers now, or takeout bags now, and it's something that I'm planning to follow up with Waste Management on because I don't have a clear answer on that. I would say to play it safe, it's probably best to remove that twine. I would also say that I hold on to most of my paper bags now, especially if they have a sturdy handle. And a lot of times, some stores will be very happy to receive bags. I know Mom's Organic Market is a big one that they encourage people to bring either reusable bags or reusable containers or anything like that to leave for the next customer who maybe forgot theirs. So if it's in good shape, I would always suggest to keep using it as long as possible. I can't tell you how many Trader Joe's bags I've just held on to, left in my car, just in case I forgot my reusable bags. I have a spare. So in the meantime, I will check on the twine. I would say probably we don't want it in our blue bin just because it's not a material type that we're actively sorting out to be recycled.
And his last question, although he may pop on and have more even, but it says, can empty plastic prescription bottles be recycled?
So we actually talked to Waste Management about this one because we noticed that some of the plastic bottles are labeled 5. The vast majority are labeled number 2 plastic. So, which is acceptable in our program. We take all number 1 and number 2 bottles and jars and jugs and spray bottles and all those. What we were told by Waste Management was that although they're perfectly happy getting these types of bottles over the counter pills, they tend to remove any orange prescription bottles. And I believe that's just a safety practice for them because they're just not entirely sure what is in those containers. If any of their staff might have an allergy to say like what are some of the ones like prednisone, various things that are prescription based, and without knowing for sure, they tend to err on the side of caution and remove those. So because of that, we have let the public know, and we do put it in our newsletters a lot, that we really don't want the orange bottles in our blue bin. We do have on our Know Before You Throw page some places that are willing to take those orange bottles. So I believe it's Matthew 2 Ministries collect them. And that's a faith-based charitable organization, and they reuse those bottles. Sometimes animal shelters might reuse prescription bottles for filling pet prescriptions. I would definitely check with them first just to be sure before you drop it off. And I like to use them to store my seeds. So I have something to put away until gardening the next year. So they're very nice to be reused, but at this time we don't want the orange prescription bottles in our blue bin.
Great. Thanks for that update. And I will say, as far as turning in your actual prescription drugs, Howard County Police Department has a receptacle there. So if you're just headed down to the courthouse area, take your old over-the-counter and prescription drugs, and you can drop them off there anytime. Don't put them down the toilet bowl, because that ends up contaminating our water, which is another issue, but it is still in the same realm. So you can take your over-the-counter and prescription drugs right to the police department. And then HC Drug Free also does prescription turn-in, take-back drug days twice a year. So if you have prescription drugs, you can turn them in there. I had a question, I think one more came in too. So you held up a container before that was like a milk, like a drink. Yes, that. So we use a lot of soy milk and oat milk, and they come in containers like that. So and we constantly argue about this in my household. Are those recyclable, and does the lid have to come off or stay on? I think you addressed that a little bit, but
Yes. So in Howard County, we can take these. They're called aseptic containers. Sometimes they are also called Tetra Paks. I think that might be a brand name though. These are acceptable in our program. This also has a how to recycle label on it, which states empty and replace cap. So yes, we take the caps on. For the most part, caps should always go back on. These caps are actually, they're technically a number 5 plastic, which means they're acceptable in our program because we take number 5s. But because of their size, they tend to fall through the equipment when they're loose. So it's best practice for really any kind of container to put the lid back on. But we do take both, and this goes as a mixed paper bale. So Waste Management has a third party that's purchasing mixed paper, knowing that it's not going to be pure, there's going to be plastic in it, and they're able to make new products from it. So yes, at this time, we're still accepting those types. I did bring some examples of something that we wouldn't take. Maybe you can tell all of my food tends to come from Aldi, so it comes in lots of interesting packaging. So here's an example of their how to recycle label. And this says that no, they do not accept the plastic pouch. So this type of pouch is considered flexible plastic. It's not accepted, and it's not accepted in the Trex recycling for plastic bagging. So like I always said, I know they're not exactly the same, but when it comes to plastics, really rigid is the best in my mind. So as soon as we start getting into the flexible or kind of just doesn't seem to be very structurally sound, it usually is an indication that the plastic isn't really the greatest. And if it's not the greatest plastic, it's hard to convince companies to purchase it because they have to buy it from a processor. If they're not going to be able to make something that is going to really profit them, it's hard to justify recycling it. So we would like to see a time when we just don't see any plastics that aren't profitable, and they're replaced with either reusable containers or compostable containers or readily recyclable containers, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay. Any other questions out there? I know some of you have been real quiet. I hope this has been informative for you. I want you to feel free to, if we didn't cover what you're interested in asking, please feel free to unmute or put it in the chat. John, can you share the Trex handout? Are you able to share that? So just so you can see a little bit of what is recyclable at St. John's Episcopal Church. He's going to share his screen, I think. And then just to follow up, I heard late last week that Baltimore City is suing PepsiCo and Coca-Cola and Frito-Lay because they don't take responsibility for the end use of their products. So this is a handout that we will send a link to in our follow-up email with the recording of today's webinar. But this is the handout from St. John's as far as what types of bags and plastics that they do accept at their Nextrex recycling. So things that you may not, if you live close by or you're going to be out in that area, you might want to. My husband always says our trash, we make maybe one bag of trash a week, and most of it's a plastic bag full of plastic bags. So I'm very excited, and St. John's is really close to my house, so I'm really excited to start keeping my bags. But just like Gina was just showing you, those frozen food bags and things like that are not acceptable in that program either. So we will send out this handout to you as well, so you can maybe help St. John's in their effort to keep this stuff out of the landfill and into something usable. So yeah. All right. So one last time, just want to be so grateful to Gina for jumping in here and offering this really valuable information, and to all of you for joining us today. If you have a chance and are available for St. John's Story of Plastics showing, they would love to have you. If you know of a congregation that would also like to show the movie, we have one more available slot. So we would love to work with another congregation to get that shown. And I think that's all. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Gina.
Thank you.
All right. Jonathan,
Thanks,
you
Gina.
can stop recording. Yep. Hey, Jack. Oh.